And I'm really delighted and honored to be here. Lou D'Alessandro has been a friend of mine a long time and a senator representing this district, this city, and this state even longer. And I thank him very much for his support and his friendship. Thank you, Lou. And I want to thank Aaron and Eleanor for being with us. And Aaron's story, unfortunately, is way too common, isn't it? And we're here on the campus of a wonderful community college, very much like the one in Oregon, where young people were going to school, and some not so young. You know, the victims I read are between 18 and 67. You know, people attending classes, improving their skills, teaching, learning, thinking about the future, which was so ended senselessly, tragically. On that very same day that those people were killed in Oregon, a 5-month-old baby strapped into her car seat in the back of a car was killed by a stray bullet in Cleveland. The third baby in just a few months to be murdered in Cleveland. Between 88 and 92 people a day are killed by guns in America. Last figures we have for a whole year is more than 33,000. It's the leading cause of death for young African American men, the second leading cause for young Hispanic men, the fourth leading cause for young white men. This epidemic of gun violence knows no boundaries, knows no limits of any kind. And when this happens, people are quick to say that they offer their thoughts and prayers. That's not enough. How many people have to die before we actually act? Before we come together as a nation You know, on the Republican side, Mr. Trump was asked about it and said something like, things like that happen in the world. And Governor Bush said, yeah, stuff happens. No, that's an admission of defeat and surrender to a problem that is killing 33,000 Americans. It's time for us to say, wait a minute, we're better than this. Our country is better than this. And there are steps we can take that improve gun safety and further the prevention of violence by guns. And today, I am proposing what I consider to be common sense approaches. A majority of Americans support universal background checks. In fact, a majority of gun owners support universal background checks. We had a bipartisan bill that didn't make it through the Senate. But we need to go back and with all of our hearts, working not just in Washington, but from the grassroots up, demand that we have universal background checks. And we have to also close the loopholes. We've got what's called the gun show loophole, and we've got what's now being called the Charleston loophole. When the Brady bill was passed, which wasn't easy, as you recall, but it did pass, exceptions were made for gun shows, and then later it was extended to include online sales. And 40% of guns are sold. Gun shows, online sales. We need to close that loophole so that when we have a universal background check, It will cover everybody. And then another loophole is what happened when the young man who murdered the 9 people at Bible study in the church basement in Charleston applied for a gun. The loophole says if they don't get the background check done in 3 days, you can still go buy the gun. Turned out he had a criminal background. And you know how record keeping is. People were still searching through it. But at the end of 3 days, he goes and buys the gun. Because we don't yet have it automated enough. We don't yet have the information shared from all levels of government. And he got his gun and was determined to go and use it to kill 9 innocent people. We also must address the very serious problem of military-style weapons on our streets. And you know, people don't really have a chance. You know, lots of times when terrible murders like this take place, somebody will say, oh, you know, if we only had more guns. You're walking to class. You're driving your baby around in a car seat. You're going to church. And somebody has an automatic weapon, or even worse, an assault weapon that is a military instrument of war, and you're somehow supposed to be able to stop that with your own gun, that has never made any sense. And so from my perspective, we have got to keep guns out of the hands of people who should not have them, domestic abusers, people with serious mental health problems. There's got to be a better tracking and record keeping. You know, I remember the terrible massacre at Virginia Tech. The shooter there had been involuntarily committed, and there was no record of it. And if there is information about people who are felons, who are suffering from serious mental illness, who are domestic abusers, we got to get that information into the record keeping so that the universal background checks will actually show you that here's somebody who shouldn't have it. Now, some people say to me, well, does this really work? Well, I can tell you this. The best data that we have is that since the Brady Bill implemented background checks, more than 2.4 million people have been stopped from buying a gun, and over 1 million of those were felons. So they were records of those particular potential purchasers. And I want to work with all of you. I want to work with sensible gun safety advocates as well as gun owners. I want to work with people from the grassroots up all the way to Washington. Because how much longer will we just shrug? Oh my gosh, something else terrible happened, whether it's in your neighborhood, Aaron, or at a community college, or the murder of children in their classrooms. We're going to go to the town hall portion of this, but I want to ask one of the mothers from Sandy Hook, if you wouldn't mind, to just come join me for a minute. Because I want you to hear from her, because so many of the parents you know, so many of the parents of these precious children who were murdered have taken the unimaginable grief that they have been bearing and have tried to be the voices that we need to hear. And I want you to introduce yourself and maybe talk about what you and other parents are trying to do to get the changes that are necessary.
Thank you so much. My name is Nicole Hockley. I'm the managing director at Sandy Hook Promise and also the mother of Dylan, who was 6 when he was killed at Sandy Hook Elementary School. Gun violence prevention was nowhere on my radar before losing my son, and I wish it had been, and I wish I had done something long before something that I thought could never hit my community hit me. As part of Sandy Hook Promise, we focus very much on gun safety legislation and the common sense practices that you're speaking of. So thank you so much for taking this on and speaking out. We also very much focus on what can we do to get ahead of the violence, get upstream of it, and help identify and intervene, help people learn how to know the signs of someone who's at risk and get help before they even get to the state of picking up a weapon to hurt someone else. I think it's a comprehensive solution that's needed between gun access and responsibility, as well as mental health and wellness, and working together with all the other organizations and all the other people, as well as yourself. I have absolute faith that we can deliver this solution and protect children across America.
Thank you. Oh, I think what you just heard really reinforces how nobody knows what might happen because we haven't done what we need to do to try to make any of us, but particularly our children, safe. So that's what's behind the proposals that I'm making. They're not new. There's nothing, unique about them other than the fact that I'm so determined we're going to do everything we possibly can to get this done. And so I know there are a lot of people here. We have a big group from Moms Demand Action and some dads as well. And I want to commend them because they are a grassroots organization that is really trying to bring these issues to the public attention. And we need more of that. I have said we need a movement that people really will be part of, no matter what other issue that is on your minds that you care about. Our safety, the great hope that we can protect people who are going about their daily business should be at the top. And therefore, I'm really asking everybody, regardless of politics or partisanship or candidates or anything else, to think of the ways that each of us can do more to try to provide that measure of gun safety that will save lives and prevent violence. So let me start by asking people if you want to say something or you have a comment to make on this or any issue. I'd like to start with this issue because I know there are people here specifically on this issue, and I want to be sure to hear from them. Former Congressman Dick Swett. Hi, how are you? Here, Dick.
It's wonderful to have you here, and it's always a pleasure to be with my good friends, the Clintons. I want to give everybody just a little bit of a background on our relationship with regard to guns. In 1994, I voted in favor of a crime bill that had in it an assault weapons ban for 17 assault weapons out of nearly 800 weapons that were on the street. I'm not looking for any attention, but I received a letter prior to that vote that I thought would be worth sharing with the people here. And I had shared it with Hillary earlier. It's a letter from Ronald Reagan, and it's dated May 5th, 1994, and it's written to Congressman Dick Swett. He writes, "Dear Dick, And here's a copy of the letter, so I'm reading off of his own handwriting. He writes, "Dear Dick, Fred Ryan told me of your conversation, and I know you are thinking very carefully about the pending assault weapons bill. As a longtime gun owner and supporter of the right to bear arms, I too have carefully thought about this issue. I am convinced that the limitations imposed in this bill are absolutely necessary. I know there is a heavy pressure on you to go the other way, but I strongly urge you to join me in supporting this bill. It must be passed. Sincerely, Ronald Reagan." I have watched Hillary and her husband Bill work with people from both sides of the aisle for nearly 30 years. She is someone who is going to solve this problem. She is going to be a leader who will make this problem ultimately go away. I have every confidence that as our president, Hillary, you will be able to tackle this problem that we began trying to tackle back in the 1990s. And I am so grateful for your leadership, and I look forward to supporting you in the upcoming elections. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, we have a lot to talk about, that is for sure. Yeah, this gentleman right there in the green shirt.
Thank you very much. We're all the way from Arizona. I grew up in Tucson, Arizona. I live there now. And I'm a gun owner and a supporter of the Second Amendment. But I couldn't give you more credit in that we need to deal with the wrong people getting guns. And especially with mental illness. As you know, in Tucson, we had a person who had all kinds of trouble, was able to buy a gun. As you said, in Virginia Tech. In Louisiana, that person had been committed. So from a gun owner, from a reddest of red states, and a person who owns guns, more power to you.
Thank you. Yes, the lady right here. Yes, here comes the microphone.
Thanks for picking on me. I have a question about the CDC and research that was cut off early in the 90s by the Republican Party. I think if you could bring that back, if we could convince legislatures to fund research into gun violence, what causes it, I think we're hitting a lot of marks with that because we're getting mental health issues, we're getting what roles guns play, how quickly people can, off someone with a gun when they want to. And if we can just analyze that data, I think we'll be in a lot better place.
I agree with you. And what she's referring to is that the Centers for Disease Control, is responsible for looking at public health issues. If there's dirty water that's making people sick, we are expecting them to tell us what to do to prevent that. So they were researching gun violence and trying to figure out who is more likely to commit violence, what kinds of warning signs might there be, and for very sad reasons, basically, you're right that the Republicans stopped the research. But it even goes further than that. There is a law in Florida, and I want you to hear this because it was so shocking at first that I really didn't believe it. There's a law in Florida that makes it a felony for a pediatrician to talk with families about being sure they keep guns safely away from children. Literally, a doctor can go to jail in Florida. Now, if you're a pediatrician and you're running through your checklist, are you keeping the household poisons out of the way of your kids, especially if you have toddlers who are exploring everything? Do you make sure your sharp knives are kept away, and are they high enough up so kids can't accidentally get them? It seems perfectly reasonable to me to say, hey, if you've got guns in the house, are you sure they're really secure? Because too many little kids get a hold of them. We read about it every week. and they kill themselves, they kill their little friends. I mean, I think it is the doctor's responsibility to try to work with the family so that the family can try to keep their babies safe. And if you're in Florida, you could go to jail. So I want to make the argument and work toward the result that, we can learn a lot more about what are the characteristics of people who should not have guns. As we were just hearing from the gentleman from Arizona, as we're learning more, certainly what we know about the killer from Sandy Hook, now the killer from Oregon, there probably were some comments, some actions that might have set off some alarms in people. But if we don't have the good information so that people can be better informed, how do we help them? And so I agree with you. No issue should be beyond study in America. I mean, that's like a denial of everything we believe in our country. And, going along with that, so far as I know, the gun industry and gun sellers are the only business in America that is totally free of liability for their behavior. Nobody else is given that immunity. And I mean, that just illustrates the extremism that has taken over this debate. I was really struck when Dick Sweat was reading the letter from Ronald Reagan and the fact that, when Dick was facing a very hard choice, which many people believe cost him his seat in Congress because he voted for the crime bill, which contained the Brady bill, which led to the background checks, which led to more than 2 million people not getting guns who were felons or domestic abusers or otherwise ineligible. He paid a big price for that. And here is a letter from Ronald Reagan. In fact, when the NRA was on one of their, tirades and calling the alcohol, tobacco, and firearms enforcers, jackbooted thugs, President George H.W. Bush resigned as an NRA member and said, no, I'm not going to be associated with that. So, I mean, ideally, what I would love to see is gun owners, responsible gun owners, hunters, form a different organization and take back the Second Amendment from these extremists. Okay. Thank you. Okay, now. Yes, this lady right there. Sure. Yeah. Here comes a microphone, so.
I'm so glad to see you, Mr. Clinton. And I know this is a big issue in the United States, but I'm from Afghanistan. I have more thinking about my country every day, more than 200, 300 people dying over there. I want to know what's your opinion after you become a president of the United States. What are you thinking about? You want to pull out all United States soldiers, or you thinking they're going to be stay there? For my opinion, we want them over there to stay there for Afghanistan for protection. And I want to know your opinion about that also. To thank you.
Well, thank you. And first, I want to say how distressed I am by the bombing of the hospital in Kunduz. And I know that Defense Secretary Carter has said that there will be a full, thorough investigation to try to get to the bottom of that. But it's deeply regrettable. It came within the context of the Taliban taking back over a city in the north and the Afghan army, which has performed very bravely. This is not an army that runs away. This is an army that stands and fights, but they don't have the experience. They don't have a lot of the support that they need to be as successful as they are trying to be. I think that we've got to continue to work with the Afghan government and the Afghan military to support them because they are fighting. It's a different story in other parts of the world, but there in Afghanistan, people are fighting for the gains that have been made in the last 13, 14 years. There still is a lot of conflict. There's still a lot of danger. The Taliban is not going away. We know that. But there has been so many positive developments. The number of girls and women in school, at work, studying in the United States, going home to try to help their countries, businesses that are able to operate now, as opposed to being under the thumb of the Taliban and being forced to, basically pay tribute all the time to the Taliban. There have been a lot of advances in health. Afghanistan had the worst maternal mortality rate in the world, and thanks to help from not just the United States, but other countries working with Afghan doctors and nurses, mothers are surviving childbirth. Some of the things that are so basic that are now so much better in Afghanistan. So I don't know the specifics or what I will be facing in January of 2017, but Afghanistan is a country that has tried, and the people are really focused on getting beyond the violence and the extremism from the Taliban, and I don't think we should just walk away. So I will do what I can to help. Here comes the microphone.
My name is Jeannie, and I was born and brought up on Belmont Street right here in town. It is no longer the city I was raised in, and a lot of that is because of drugs and because of gun violence. But my question to you, Hillary, if I can call you that,
or you can call me Val.
or Val, is my question I'm so excited to ask you is, last week a reporter asked Dr. Ben Carson one question, and that question was, as President of the United States, what would you do in advance to assist the folks of a horrible event like Hurricane Joaquin? And he kept it very short and succinct, and his three-word answer was, I don't know. Along with that, as you said, last week, a reporter asked Jeb Bush what he thought about the tragedy in Oregon. And he kept it even shorter, as you said. And his response to that horrific tragedy was, stuff happens. I would like to know from you, like you to explain to this audience and to the nation, why those would not have been your responses, and why, as President of the United States, you are ready to lead from day one.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Well, let's take the natural disaster question first, because Hurricane Joaquin was on everyone's mind. Thankfully, it didn't hit as hard as they feared, although South Carolina is getting battered with terrible torrential rains. I think one of the most important decisions any new president has is who's going to run FEMA and who's going to be prepared to work with cities, states, and the national government to get prepared for incoming natural disasters, to get pre-positioned the equipment and the food and the experts that you're going to need to be able to help people. And I will take that very seriously, looking for someone who has real hands-on experience, not from a 30,000 feet flying over it, but who's been there, who has had to go in and figure out what to do to help people evacuate, what needed to be done to try to do as much as possible to help people save their homes but not stay in their homes. There's just a lot of hard-won wisdom. And because of climate change, we are seeing an increased number of weather events, all over the world, not just in our country. And we need a mapping project. Here, I'll give you a perfect example of why I disagree so profoundly with the current Republicans. We already heard the letter from Ronald Reagan. I told you about President George H.W. Bush. But the current Republicans in the Congress are trying to cut dramatically the money the federal government puts into weather forecasting. And to me, that is so, what's that old saying, penny wise, pound foolish. We've got to have the best possible weather forecasting, not only for agriculture and, everyday occurrences, but also to get ahead of, natural disasters and events like big storms. So I will appoint good people. I will look across the government to figure out what we need to do better so we have excellent communication with states and local governments, and that we keep people well informed so that they can make good decisions for themselves, and that we move really quickly to come in after something has happened, because we can't stop the weather, we know that, but to be really ready to get in there to help the cleanup and the recovery. And I think that people need to be empowered to help themselves too. I'm a little worried that sometimes the federal government's message is don't do anything till we get there. That's not my message. Help each other. Help fix the problems. Help work and take pictures. Take pictures and record things, because people are afraid to do that, because then they say, I want to get some help from the disaster assistance funding, and they're told, well, you should have left it alone. No, you shouldn't leave it alone. You should be out there helping your neighbors. You should be out there. And, my goodness, everybody in the world has a cell phone. Keep a record of it, so then when the federal government, FEMA, Small Business Administration, others show up, you can say, here's what we had right after the storm. Here's what we've been doing to clean up. Here's what we've spent on, plywood and boarding and the big vacuums to clean up the dirt and all of that. I'm very hands-on, very practical, very let's get it done, and that's how I would view this. Oh my goodness. Yes, this young lady right there.
I was just gonna say it has nothing to do with the weather, so I was just but by the time I go to college, what would you like the United States to be like?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, can I ask you how old you are right now?
10.
10. Okay, so I've got a little time, but not a lot. Well, first of all, I want it to truly be the country we all love and cherish, and that has given so much to every one of us who is here in this room today, and that still holds out that same promise to you, that if you work hard and you do your part, you will be able to get ahead, stay ahead, and pursue your dreams. That's what I want for every young person in our country. And that means we got to get the economy working better so that it produces more jobs with rising incomes. And I have a lot to say about that, but it's really critical because I want you to feel like whatever you choose to do, you're going to be part of this great country of ours. I want the education system, it sounds like it's working pretty well for you. I want it to work for everybody, and particularly starting with our youngest kids to get them off to a better start so that they can be successful in school. And I want college to be affordable for you. So we got to get the costs down. And, I've outlined what I call the New College Compact to do just that, because I just don't want to see young people with ambition, talent, a good work ethic not be able to either start school or finish school because it's too expensive and they can't afford it. We have got to deal with that, and we've got to, get the costs down so that people don't go into debt. And I know that this is a problem in New Hampshire, and we have to refinance the debt that people have so they can be more free to pursue their own interests, and they can actually move out of their parents' home and maybe rent or buy one and get on with their lives. And with healthcare, I want us to have more and more people who have insurance so that they have quality, affordable health care. And I want us to deal with the big substance abuse epidemic so that we begin to turn the tide on heroin and pills and other addictions that are ruining people's lives. And going back to the gun discussion, we've got to have more treatment for mental health, and we have to figure out how to help more people get the treatment, assuming it is available. And I want the world to be safer. I want the world that you will become an adult in to still be led by the United States, because there is no alternative. The United States, if we don't lead, nobody leads. You have a vacuum. And that vacuum is filled by a lot of bad actors, including terrorist groups who will take advantage of their neighbors and eventually even threaten us. And I want to protect our rights, our civil rights, our human rights, gay rights, women's rights. I want to protect the rights of Americans. And so we have a lot of work to do, and I can't possibly, even as president, do all of that. This has to be done by everybody working together, everybody standing up for the kind of country that we want to live in, that we want to see for our children. And, you know, I'm a grandmother, as maybe you know, and I will just say this. I'm the granddaughter of a factory worker. You know, my grandfather worked in the Scranton lace mills in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and he worked really hard. And he did it to support his family, and he did it so that his sons would have a better life. And they did. All three of his sons actually ended up going to college. And my dad started a small business. And it was really small, but it provided a really good middle-class life for us. And then here I am, third generation, asking all of you to elect me president. I mean, that is the American story. And I will do whatever I can, as will my husband, to help our granddaughter have the best possible life. But you know what? That's not enough. It's not enough. And that's what I want people to understand. You shouldn't have to be the granddaughter of a former president or Secretary of State to believe you can fulfill your dreams in our country. You should be able to be the granddaughter of a factory worker or the grandson of a truck driver and have that same opportunity. So every single day, I'm going to wake up in the White House and I'm going to say to myself, what am I going to do today to make sure every child in this country has a chance to live up to his or her God-given potential? That is my mission as the president. Oh my goodness, so many hands. It's so little. Yes, right there. Yeah. Here, I'll give you my microphone.
Good morning. Thank you for taking my question. And you are right. Every day or every week we are hearing in the news about children dying on the streets or in their schools at the hands of strangers with guns. We are also hearing about children dying in their homes by the hands of their caregivers. We're seeing child poverty continue to increase as children slip through the shredded safety nets. And we're hearing from college professors and employers that young people are coming to them not ready to learn or prepared for 21st century jobs. So as president, what policies would you look to move forward in your first 100 days to protect our children and prepare them for their future?
Thank you. Well, sadly, her question really points to what's been happening in our country, where over the last 10 years, because of the Great Recession, because of the huge loss of jobs and wealth that people had built up before 2007, 2008, poverty is on the increase. Today, 51% of the children in our public schools are eligible for lower reduced cost or free lunches. And we were on a good path, may I say, in the 90s. We were on a good path to lift more people out of poverty. And by lifting families out of poverty, you help to lift children out of poverty. And we're going to have to redouble our efforts to do all of that again. I give President Obama enormous credit for digging us out of the deep ditch that he was in when the Republicans left. And there are a number of things we have to do. The top of the list is more jobs raise the minimum wage so people who work full time are not still living in poverty and they can provide a better life for their children. More jobs in general, and there are a lot of great projects. We have a lot of roads and bridges and rail track and airports and ports and everything else in our country that is deteriorating, and it needs to be built up, maintained, so that we're more competitive economically, and that would put millions of people to work. And I think we can combat climate change by more clean energy jobs, which would be millions of jobs and businesses if we shifted the incentives that are still in the tax code and other parts of our government for fossil fuels to wind and solar and advanced biofuels. We would be ahead on the climate change front, and we would be putting people to work. And we're already seeing that in some parts of our country. We just need to do it all the way across. I think people who work for corporations should be able to share in the profits, not just the CEOs, but everybody up and down the line in those companies. Very much like Market Basket, a place that you all know because they now have profit sharing for their employees. I think we need to do more to support small business, which creates 60% of the jobs in America. And right now we're behind in small business creation and growth. We used to be number one. We're now not even the top 10. So I want to do more and more credit, get rid of regulations and licensing and the barriers that stand in the way for people to start their business like my dad did and be able to provide a good middle-class life. And once we get the economy moving again, then we can turn our attention to how we can be good partners with families with children. So here are some of my thoughts, and I've worked in this area for a very long time. First and foremost, we have to keep them safe and free from violence by strangers or those within their own homes and families. We also need to help kids who may not have the opportunities that many of our kids and my grandchild has to get ahead, and that means you have to have early childhood education. And it's not just it's not just a nice thing to do. If you don't prepare kids their first 5 years, when they get to school, they will be behind. There will be an achievement gap. And then it's really hard for the kid and the family and the school to close that gap. And I happen to think talent is everywhere, but I don't think opportunity is. And I don't know what we're losing because we have poor kids who are not given a chance to really get off to a good start, whose brains are not being, stimulated the way that will help them get a vocabulary so that they can be successful in school. So I think the early childhood piece of this is very important. Healthcare is essential. I helped to start the Children's Health Insurance Program back in the 90s, which takes care of 8 million kids. And that's why I find states that don't want to expand Medicaid to be really missing the boat. We need to have people healthy. How can we have a competitive economy if they can't get their basic health needs met? And that's particularly true for kids. My first job out of law school was with the Children's Defense Fund, and we would go into schools, and kids couldn't see, and we stopped having school nurses. We stopped testing their eyesight. I found out that I couldn't see in 4th grade because I didn't know I couldn't see. So my mother would, of course, taken me to find out, but I didn't know. I thought the world was just a big impressionist painting, and I just got up really close to the TV set. So then we had an eye exam in school, and I found out, oh my gosh, I really can't see. Well, there's so many kids who are not getting those basic health needs met. That also holds them back. And then, of course, once we're in school, I think we should start respecting teachers again who are actually in the classroom with the kids and try to help them help the children. And then I literally could go on all day. I'll just say one more thing. We now have a hunger problem again. A lot of us thought that was behind us. We have both a hunger and a nutrition problem. We have maybe not the kind of hunger that turns people into what is obviously physical malnutrition, but we don't have adequate nutrition in a lot of neighborhoods and communities, and we don't have a lot of families who understand how to best feed their kids, because what they can afford is not necessarily good for their kids, but it's affordable. So, so we need to do more work on this to get back to where there isn't that sense of either hunger or poor nutrition that can really affect a child's development. So this is something I would do as president, but I would ask everybody to help me do, because there's work to be done in every community, including Manchester. Yeah, the gentleman in the blue shirt right there.
Hello. I guess I'm wondering what we're going to do about mental health in this country. I think it's come up so much with substance abuse to various shootings to, what was the other one? Oh yeah, just the general state of our lack of funding towards all of the service providers out there. And I think that this all happened after we deinstitutionalized mental health, and we had a promise to fund it, but we never did. How are you going to change that?
Well, you are absolutely right. Some of you remember that, right? Back in the 1980s, we had a lot of debate over big institutions where people were housed, but in many cases they were warehoused. And the result of a lot of investigations which showed how people were not being adequately cared for was to shut down a lot of the institutions. At the same time, those who were worried about what would happen to people if there were no place for them were guaranteed we'd have funding and community alternatives for mental health. So we shut down the institutions, by and large, and we never really invested what we should in mental health alternatives. That's going to be something that I push very hard, because you mentioned gun violence, which is something that is often directly related to mental health problems. The addiction issue. A lot of people with mental health challenges are self-medicating with alcohol and drugs. So then they have a dual problem that has to be addressed. So I think as we move forward with the Affordable Care Act, we have to enforce the decision that was made that people with physical health and mental health will get treatment. But right now, a lot of insurance companies, a lot of states, a lot of businesses are not providing the kind of support you need for mental health. When somebody is either convinced or decides to seek mental health problems, they very often are told, well, we have no place for you, come back in 6 weeks or 3 months, and who knows what will happen. So where most people now who are presenting with mental health problems show up? They're in our jails and our prisons. And it's understandable, because they're a harm to themselves or to others. They often act out in a way that draws attention of law enforcement. And in most places in the country, there's nowhere else for them to go, so they're put in jail. And they may be held there for a long time without any treatment. And then they end up in prison, and they're still not getting adequate treatment. The other point I want to say about this is, because we have overprescribed painkillers, the opioids, we have a lot of people who've gotten very addicted to them. And that creates a mental strain on top of whatever other problems you might have. And so we now have a lot of people who have to try to withdraw. And we have about 23 million people who are addicted in America. So when they go for help, only 1 in 10 can get it. So you've got this real double whammy. People with mental health problems aren't getting help. People with addiction and substance abuse problems are not getting help. And you've got to figure out how we take resources and treat both people simultaneously, because too often they become interconnected, and then we have a real problem. So I pledge to you, I'm going to do everything I can, more facilities, more trained people, more insurance coverage, more revenues. So, yeah. Oh, okay. Well, you can call on somebody. You know everybody. That got my attention. Yeah, Lou told me we only have time for one more question. Here you go.
Yes, a man who lives next door to here, his name's Sanders, I think. He has an idea about sending kids to college for free, as he thinks they do in Europe. It's not actually free, but do you have a plan that would sort of make him back down a little bit on this?
Well, I'll speak for myself. He is certainly more than capable of speaking for himself. And we're going to have a debate in about, I guess, 8 days. So we'll have a chance to contrast. But I want you, if you're interested in this issue, and I think everybody is, how we get college more affordable and how we refinance student debt, go to my website, hillaryclinton.com, and it's called the New College Compact. But very briefly, I do have a different approach. First of all, and my approach has been thankfully endorsed by a lot of people, because I think what it does is address the many aspects of this problem. First, we got to get the cost of college down. Colleges and universities have to quit raising tuition and costs on students and families. And so if all we do is to say we're going to have free college, but we don't really put pressure on the colleges and the universities to lower the cost, you're going to continue to see costs going up, and then the cost of the, quote, free college will continue to go up. That, to me, is unsustainable. So first and foremost, I want colleges and universities looking at, how many administrators they need, how many buildings they need, how many different courses are no longer really relevant. I mean, let's take a hard look at what we're doing on campus, get those costs down so we can keep tuition down. Secondly, I have said that the federal government, I have a plan, $350 billion over 10 years, so about $35 billion a year, where we would match for every dollar that the state would put into making college more affordable for their students. We would match them 4-1, but they would have to agree on some of these changes in public colleges and universities to get that money. And then if you choose a public college or university, I will make it possible for you to go without borrowing money for tuition, but I will expect something from you. Like, for example, 10 hours of work a week. I worked when I was in college. I worked when I was in law school. And I want young people to know this is an important value. And yes, you have to work for it, but it will be for a public college or university possible to not borrow money for tuition. Now, for living expenses, I will make it possible for the Pell Grants to be used for living expenses, because what happens now is that young people who get a Pell Grant, they often find it doesn't even cover tuition anymore. So we'll deal with the tuition side on the public college and the university, and then we'll deal with the living expense side. And if you do have to borrow money, it will be with a low interest rate, and I will forgive loans to people who do public service jobs after a period of time. So what, and I have to tell you, I don't think college should be free for Donald Trump's children, right? I think people who are well off should have to pay for college. I'm interested in the middle class and working people and poor kids who deserve to have a better shot at going to college and graduating. So, and I feel strongly that when you already have debt, and who has student debt still? Oh yeah. We have 40 million people in America with student debt. And what I want is to refinance all that student debt. Because right now, if you have a home mortgage or you're making car payments, you can refinance it. We forbid you from refinancing the student debt. And at the event I did earlier in Hollis, there was a young woman way in the back who said her interest rate is 12%. And so I want us to refinance it, and I want to provide everybody the chance to pay back their loans as a percentage of their income. So, if you're a firefighter or a school principal or you're a social worker or a police officer, whatever you're doing that you want to do, but you're not making a lot of money, you're not going to have to pay back at that high interest rate. You're going to be able to pay back at about 10% of your income. That's when I got out of law school and I went to work for the Children's Defense Fund. I didn't go to a big law firm. I went to work for a nonprofit because I wanted to work on behalf of kids. And so I was lucky enough that the university at that time offered me the chance to pay it back as a percentage. So both, Bill and I had loans, and he was a law professor. After CDF, I became a law professor. We were making, as I recall, like $14,000, $17,000 a year, and we were paying back our loans by what we could afford. And so I want this to be, as I say, a compact where people do their part. Obviously, young people have to do their part. Families have to do what they can afford to do. Colleges have to pitch in and get those costs down. And the federal government will partner with states. Now, if a state, and we've had this example with Medicaid, the state says, no, we don't want to partner with the federal government, then I will go right to institutions like this one. And I do want community colleges to be as inexpensive as possible because it's an important step for a lot of young people to take. So thank you all very much.